Britain and France have agreed to work with Ukraine on halting hostilities in the country's 3-year full-scale war with Russia.
Einen Deal über die Ukraine zu machen, das wird Sie nicht überraschen, wenn ich das sage. Das ist sowohl für die Ukraine inakzeptabel als auch für Europa.
Wir müssen unsere deutsche Unterstützung für die Ukraine noch einmal ausbauen. Und zwar unverzüglich.
You might not fully realize it yet, but the speed at which the world is changing is absolutely mind-blowing. Russia and China once felt sure they had the upper hand, confident that Ukraine would collapse, that the Western alliance would fall apart, and that the United States would get distracted and lose its grip. But what's unfolding now is something they never saw coming. With Donald Trump constantly shifting his position, even the United States appears unable to stop what's racing toward us. The European Union, the United Kingdom, Turkey, France, and NATO are rising to the occasion, taking bold, history-making steps that could alter the course of this war forever, maybe even delivering the final checkmate. Right now, Britain and France are holding serious discussions about possibly deploying troops to monitor a ceasefire in Ukraine, but only if a peace agreement is reached. Meanwhile, the US remains firm in its stance that it won't send American personnel. Russia has flat-out rejected any NATO forces on the ground, and as for Turkey's involvement, it's still only a concept at this stage. But before we dive even deeper into this explosive analysis, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon. We break down the noise and bring you global updates with clarity you won't find anywhere else. Now, let's get into it. Donald Trump, the very president who once provided military support to Ukraine to fight back against Russian aggression, has now done a complete 180. He's questioned whether the US should keep sending aid, claimed he could end the war in just 24 hours, and even suggested that Ukraine should consider giving up territory in exchange for peace. These shocking statements have rocked NATO to its core. People are now asking, can the US still be trusted to lead the alliance? Or is it time for Europe to take charge of its own destiny? Here's the problem. No one, not Ukraine, not the European allies, and certainly not Vladimir Putin, is taking Trump's words at face value. His unpredictability has deeply shaken the confidence of NATO, and if he were to return to the White House, Ukraine could lose its most powerful ally. And yet, against all odds, Ukraine did not fall. Its military forces, backed by an unbreakable civilian spirit, held their ground, even reclaimed territory that had once been lost. Instead of pulling back, NATO doubled down, boosting its presence in Eastern Europe, strengthening its borders and fast-tracking Finland and Sweden into the alliance. Western powers slammed Russia with crushing sanctions that cut the country off from global financial systems, devastated its energy profits, and left it relying on low-quality weapons from North Korea and Iran. China's support of Russia in this conflict against the West is no accident. It's a calculated gamble. Beijing can't afford to see Putin defeated. This war is draining Western resources, so the longer it drags on, the more it plays into China's hands. Their partnership with Russia has, until now, paid off. China has thrown the Kremlin lifelines in trade, energy, and diplomacy. But this alliance isn't just about politics. It's about reshaping the world into a new anti-Western order. However, the intense Ukrainian resistance and the war's transformation into a brutal, drawn-out conflict have taken China by surprise. This misstep is now backfiring, damaging its ties with the West, inviting American sanctions, and raising fears that Russia could take the war to an even more dangerous level. To keep things from spiraling further, China is walking a careful line. On one side, it continues providing real support to help Russia survive Western pressure. On the other, it crafts a diplomatic illusion, pretending to remain neutral while subtly backing Moscow's war effort. Beijing's goal is crystal clear: keep Russia financially stable and militarily ready. At the same time, China is also setting boundaries, like publicly affirming Kazakhstan's sovereignty and standing firm against the use of nuclear weapons. Now, however, China finds itself in a deeply uncomfortable position. Its no-limits alliance with Russia is beginning to backfire. While still offering political support to Putin, China has avoided providing full-scale military aid, fearing retaliatory sanctions that could cripple its own economy. Watching Russia, its most powerful ally, struggle to maintain control, China is starting to worry that a similar misstep in Taiwan could provoke the same kind of collective Western response. What was once envisioned as a swift, strategic win has turned into a prolonged nightmare. And now Europe is no longer playing the waiting game, it's stepping into leadership mode. Despite Washington's firm refusal to deploy American troops, Britain and France, Europe's top military powers, are actively considering sending forces to supervise a ceasefire in Ukraine after a peace agreement is reached. This signals a significant shift. The European Union and NATO allies are no longer relying on the United States to take the lead. They've already committed billions of dollars to strengthen Ukraine's defenses, delivered advanced weapon systems, and imposed sanctions that are steadily suffocating Russia's economy. France, the UK, Germany, and Poland have reinforced their support, fully aware that if Ukraine falls, the rest of Europe could soon be at risk. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer recently confirmed that a major deal has been made with Ukraine, providing £1.6 billion, about $2 billion for 5,000 air defense missiles. But that's not all. The UK has also pledged a loan of £2.26 billion, roughly $2.84 billion, backed by frozen Russian assets to further assist Ukraine. An additional $19.4 billion is being contributed by France, Germany, and Italy. Other significant contributions include $3.7 billion from Canada, $3.07 billion from Japan, and $2.8 billion from the UK in loan financing. This massive support effort from the European Union is breathing new life into Ukraine's struggle. And in a historic move, Norway and the EU have agreed to supply Ukraine with a record-breaking $1.7 trillion in aid. This bold stance by Norway has elevated its global standing and earned widespread international respect. French President Emmanuel Macron, reflecting on Russia's intentions, noted that Putin's betrayal of the Minsk agreements, made with France, Germany, and Ukraine after Russia's 2014 annexation of Crimea, had already exposed his unreliability. Macron stated that recent revelations about Russia's plans to continue its aggression against Europe, even after a hasty peace deal with Ukraine, explained Moscow's furious response this past Thursday. Macron added, exposing his true intentions likely struck a nerve. Responding to Trump's insinuations that France wouldn't come to America's aid if attacked, Macron pointed out that France and other European countries had stood with U.S. forces in Afghanistan after 9/11. Yet one unexpected player may soon shift the dynamics of this war even further: Turkey. For years, Turkey has maintained a careful balance, purchasing military equipment from Russia while remaining a crucial NATO ally. It has walked a diplomatic tightrope, but things are beginning to change. Reports have emerged that Turkey may be weighing the possibility of sending troops to Ukraine. If confirmed, this move could dramatically alter the course of the conflict. Why? Because Turkey commands one of the most formidable and well-equipped militaries within NATO. Its involvement would send an unmistakable message to Moscow. The West is no longer content with playing defense. According to sources, Turkish deployment would only proceed after a formal ceasefire is declared between Russia and Ukraine. Furthermore, it's expected that only non-combat units would be sent, tasked with monitoring and upholding the truce. As reported by Turkish media this week, separate diplomatic meetings were held in Ankara last month, where Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky engaged in discussions with President Tayyip Erdogan about the possibility of a troop deployment. Although Turkey has historically been at odds with Moscow, it has maintained amicable relations with both Russia and Ukraine throughout the conflict. Since 2023, Turkey has supported military forces that have successfully defeated Russia's allies in Syria and Azerbaijan, demonstrating a complex but strategic balancing act. If Turkey goes through with this move, it could elevate NATO's involvement in Ukraine to an entirely new dimension. And as for Vladimir Putin, ignoring such a shift would no longer be an option. So, what could be next? Let's look at the potential scenarios. Russia is forced to retreat and agree to a peace deal, one that would actually work in Ukraine's favor. Turkey's entry into the conflict escalates the situation, drawing NATO into an even more significant military engagement. China reevaluates its partnership with Russia, recognizing the war as a costly miscalculation. Donald Trump returns to the presidency and withdraws American involvement, shifting the responsibility entirely onto Europe's shoulders. One thing remains clear: the world has reached a critical crossroads. Regardless of what path the future takes, one truth is undeniable. Russia's original strategy has already unraveled. Their plan to divide and weaken the West has backfired. Instead of sowing disunity, they've unintentionally solidified the West's resolve. Now it's your turn. What's your take on all this? Do you believe Europe and NATO will take the reins as the US steps aside? Could Turkey's involvement be the game changer that shifts the war's direction? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't already, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into global events.